Widow Blackwood's house, the dare that went too far. The house stood at the edge of the town, hunched and brooding atop a lonely hill. Against the bruise-colored sky of twilight, its silhouette stretched like the gnarled hand of something ancient and unforgiving. To the locals, it was Widow Blackwood's house, a dark secret the town had learned to live alongside, but never with. The stories were shared in whispers, passed down like cursed heirlooms. They said Widow Blackwood was a witch, her life steeped in dark lore, and the house was her domain, a place tainted by malevolence, where the walls themselves remembered her magic. A dare led us onto that hill and into that house. We didn't know it then, but we would pay dearly for our curiosity. The ascent was steep, the air growing bitterly cold, though the autumn night wasn't biting enough to explain it. With each step up the hill, our laughter and bravado dimmed, as if the house itself siphoned the courage out of us before we could even reach the front door. There it stood, tall and weather-beaten, with shingles curled like dead leaves and windows that stared outward like blind eyes. Its front door, an ominous slab of dark warped wood, swayed on rusting hinges. It creaked eerily, as though alive, and as we approached, it groaned open on its own. No wind, no hands pulling it. Just the house, quietly welcoming us inside. The air inside was thick, damp, and still as a grave. Dust hung in the beams of our flashlights. The floorboards groaned underfoot, but the sound echoed strangely, as though the house were responding to our intrusion. A faint smell of rot drifted through the air, something decaying, long forgotten. We whispered to each other, though we didn't know why. It was instinctive, as though anything louder than a murmur might summon something we wouldn't be able to face. Shadows danced along the walls, not entirely matching the movements of our lights. Still, we pressed forward, first one step, then another, deeper into Widow Blackwood's sanctuary of secrets. We pressed forward, first one step, then another, deeper into Widow Blackwood's sanctuary of secrets. The whispers began almost immediately, faint and indecipherable at first. They seemed to seep from the walls, the floor, even the air itself. At first we brushed it off as nerves, as the creaks of an old building, but then one of us froze. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely audible. We listened. The whispers grew. This time they weren't faint. They were layered, overlapping, rising and falling like broken chants. They were speaking in no language we recognized, yet they struck a chord within us that we couldn't explain. A chill ran through me as I realized the whispers weren't echoes. They were voices, real, malicious, and aware. The deeper we ventured, the less sense it all made. Corridors stretched impossibly long, doors led to nowhere. At one point, we turned into a hallway to find it repeating itself, each step placing us back where we started. The house was rearranging itself like a living beast coiling its prey. We laughed nervously, trying to convince ourselves it was a trick of perception. But when we turned back, the door we'd come through no longer existed. The house had made its choice. It wasn't letting us leave. We found a room unlike the others, a library, dark and dust-coated. Shelves sagged under the weight of rotting tomes. Each spine bore strange symbols, letters that almost seemed to move if you stared too long. One of us, the bravest, or the most foolish, reached for a book. The moment his fingers touched the leather cover, the temperature in the room dropped. Lights blinked out, one by one, until our flashlights were the only source left. Then the whispers returned, louder, almost hissing, angry now. The book fell from his hands and the room exploded with the sound of what could only be described as laughter. Not human laughter. This came from something else, something cold, ancient, and cruel. Terrified and desperate to find a way out, we moved faster, stumbling blindly through the twisting house. That's when we came upon it, the room of symbols. The air in this room was heavier, oppressive, as though it bore the weight of all the house's dark history. Burned into the wooden floor was a circle of cryptic runes, slashed through with jagged patterns that seemed more alive than decor. The walls bore marks too, claw-like scratches and the faint outlines of words smudged beyond recognition. The room pulsed with quiet energy, like the steady beat of a heart. Before we could react, the door swung shut behind us with a forceful bang. The whispers became screams. That's when we saw it, her, the portrait. It hung crooked above the fireplace, blackened with soot yet unmistakable in presence. There she was, Widow Blackwood. Her face was sharp, her eyes dark pits of cruelty. But as we gazed at it, Horror dawned on us. Her eyes moved. They followed us. Even as we trembled, the face itself began to distort. The smile twisted into something impossible, teeth elongating into jagged spikes. Her hand in the painting reached outward, stretching beyond the wooden frame. That's when one of us screamed, and the spell broke. In our panic, we ran. The house played its final trick. A door slammed between us, splitting the group in two. One pair stumbled into deeper horrors, the rooms warping around them. Walls dripped black ooze. The sounds of dragging footsteps stalked them wherever they turned. And then there were the shadows. They weren't natural, flowing like liquid and reaching with long, clawed fingers. The rest of us faced another nightmare. A book, bleeding ink, lay open on a pedestal. The ink twisted in the air, forming horrifying shapes. A noose, an open grave, a single staring eye. Then came a voice, no whisper this time, but a low, guttural command. You shouldn't have come. In the center of the room she emerged, more shadow than flesh, but undeniably alive. Widow Blackwood. Her figure shifted with the flickering flames of conjured candles as though her very existence was unstable. Her hollow voice cut through us. The house needs fear. It feeds on you. It will keep you. The message was clear. One of us had to stay so that the others might leave. One soul for three. The argument tore at us. Who would stay? Who could stay? Widow Blackwood didn't care for our pleading. She loomed larger and the house groaned, tightening its grip. The walls seemed to close in, stripping away every other option. Finally, in an act of bravery or despair, one of us stepped forward. This isn't your choice to make, one of us yelled, but it was too late. The house had its offering. The house let us go. Just as suddenly as it had sealed itself shut, the front door opened, spilling us back into the crisp night air. We turned back once, just once, and saw the house. It stood silent, unmoving, as if nothing had happened at all. But we knew better. The next morning all seemed fine, but the memory of what we'd left behind haunted us. We had left a soul behind for the widow, and deep down we knew the house wasn't done. They say if you pass Widow Blackwood's house now, you'll see a figure standing in the window. Some say it's her, others, well, they think it's the one we didn't bring back. The house still watches, waiting for the next foolhardy soul to step inside. Would you dare?